His Royal Highness Prince El-Hassan bin Talal.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I am going to skip the titles because it is not all of us here who are important. The people who are important are the millions of people who are suffering today in many parts of the world. Jordan initiated the call for an international humanitarian order in the early 1980s. The dangers that we foresaw were man against man. Over 43 regional conflicts in the world today as we speak. 80% of the world's refugees are Muslims as we speak. Man against nature. And I would like to remember that the Environment Prize was given to my friend Al Gore in Singapore for his work on climate change, global warming, they said. I was given the same prize on the same day for West Asia. There were 6 of us. Of course, the others were much more important than myself, so nobody mentioned me. But what for, they said? I said, for human warning, not global warming, but human warning. The environment should be both the human as well as the physical. And last but not least, man-made disasters. And here I'm not speaking only of Nineveh and Babel. I'm not speaking of Palmyra or the Yemen, Said Ma'rib, the finest construction of a dam in the history of the world, destroyed by modern machinery. I just want to ask you all, because I can see the mobile telephones communicating and I can see the overcoats coming onto the backs of many of you, would you please make virtue out of necessity? Just stand up for a moment's silence and remembering the suffering victims of this world. Thank you all very much. As for the hall in which you receive us, I was told yesterday as we listened to the abbot in the cathedral on top of the hill, the Benedictine abbot, that he was addressing his congregation in terms of the importance of art. And we were all so touched that in this house of God, that art, spiritual and aesthetic feelings were being invoked. You've all mentioned Giorgio Lapira's perspective of peace, and I'd just like to say a few words in Italian, if you'll permit a few words of Italian lingua toscana in Bocca Giordana. He invoked la triplice famiglia di Abramo in the Mediterranean. And I took the Mediterranean and I said, Mediterra, terra media. Aurelio Pecce, the Club of Rome, the Accademia dei Lincei, many of your scholars and men of faith. I am old enough to remember Cardinal Pignedoli. When we were in conversation in Rome, we were los otros. Today we are per non Christianis, pro non Christianis. And I think the time has come to recognize in the words of Giorgio Lapira that l'edificio della pace esige anzitutto la pace dei popoli con Dio. La pace dei popoli con Dio. building peace requires above all the peace of peoples with God. It is very easy to talk about the other, as I said earlier. The other may be yourself. And I would like to invoke his spirit. Abbattere I muri, e construire I ponti, break down the walls and build bridges. The Mediterranean should be a nexus, a sea of peace, and not a sea of death. In this spirit, we have started our conversations 4 decades ago. Every decade we have a war in the Middle East, the so-called Middle East. 1956, 1967, 1973, 1981, 1990, 2000, 2011, the beginning of the Syrian war, and now the Yemen war. Imagine, though you have had the experience in Italy of the anthropology of suffering in successive wars and European civil wars, how difficult it is to build again. It is for this reason that the Al-Quds University, I am happy to announce, is taking positive steps toward the creation of a pro-doctoral institute for studies, for heritage studies of Jerusalem. Because I think it's all very well to speak about international interest in our region, but what about our interest in our own region? There is not a single country today, whether in archaeology, geology, geography, geophysiology, whatever you wish to mention, that can solve its own problems on its own. We, the Mashriq region, have this one word left, Levant, le lever du soleil, the rising sun, to meet the illumination, those of you who are the products of the tradition des Lumières, the tradition of light, have for the last few decades, since 1981 and Oxford, some of you have come the whole journey in partnering with me and with many of our Jordanians and Arabs from the Mashriq region in developing voluminous notes. And in Jordan again, only a few days ago, the Encyclopedia Palestinica was launched with 24 volumes and over 7,000 pages, 30,000 paintings, photos, and manuscripts, as well as historical maps of Palestine, focused largely on the life of the people of Palestine, the people of Jerusalem, with, as you rightly said, the last speaker, the past as prologue to the present and future. The work we will be doing here, you will be doing it, I'm just a prince, whatever that means. Continues to be of the utmost importance to human dignity. In particular, may I draw attention to this new expression that you have coined, sustainable cultural heritage through engagement of local communities. I would add, through engagement and empowerment and enablement of local communities. Whether you're introducing the dam in Java, in the northeastern desert, a few thousand years old, or you're referring to a place of abundant agriculture, such as Pella, it is the local community that should be introduced as custodians of their past and their future. We face a desperate need to balance the humanitarian needs of human dignity in the Levant, in the Mashriq. The Arab Mashriq, of course, is Palestine, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq. The Levant is Arab wa Turk, Arab wa Kurd, Arab wa Furs, Arabs and Turks, Arabs and Kurds, Arabs and Persians. And I'm not saying Arabs and Jews, because I believe, as you know, the Abrahamic religions have to find common ground in ethics. But in today's world of politics, forgive me if I express the doubt that ethics have anything to do with politics. I would say, as I say to Israeli delegations on a regular basis, which Israel do you want to be? Israel in the region, Israel and the region, Greater Israel, global Israel. Yes, there are countries in our region who believe that they are global countries. Why? Because they are exercising politics at the higher order of weapons and oil. That is the elephant in our region. We are trying to make policy matter to people and through policy. Policy where people matter. We are trying to say that the ravages of Ain Dara, Palmyra, Nineveh, Ma'rib Dam and others are also combined with the ravages of funding restrictions and pressures because money is spent on weapons of destruction, which force us to justify the importance of the work we are doing. It is therefore a dream that a day might come where, as with the Iberian Peninsula, the Mashriq, the Levant, might consider creating a shared heritage foundation with those who are committed to regional heritage, to be followed by those who are prepared to answer the basic question: are you prepared to be part of the region and to end confrontation or not? In a world where complex and multifaceted ideas are often reduced to simple binary choices, as the last two speakers have tried to do, I'll ask them after 3 days what degree of success they feel they have achieved. I would just like to remind you that the instant gratification of the clickbait culture is becoming as damaging as a rogue airstrike. As Dr. Zaidan Kafafi has pointed out clearly, and we'll discuss during this conference, the modern world is suffering both a culture in crisis and a crisis in cultures. Despite the proximities of geography, this crisis is not restricted to the Levant region. As the refugee crisis rises to barely sustainable levels, both in Jordan and throughout the Levant, so too are millions more people moving throughout Europe and the Americas, the ensemble of humanity in search of a better connectivity, Professor, connectivity not in geography and geology and history, but in sociography, social and graph, the people and the picture, which should be part of our internet, not of our internet. Inner justice, inner peace, inner cultural intimacy, to talk to the people, to all the people, on their terms. I only need to thank one person, I think, who has not been mentioned, and that is my daughter, Sumaya, who would have loved to be with you here today. But has been treated successfully, we all hope, at Sloan Kettering, and I don't have to mention the specialization of that university or that hospital. She is returning to Jordan, I hope, in the next few days. She always spoke of the rhetoric of victimization. That is to say, blaming all of society's problems at the feet of those who seek solace and shelter, fleeing conflict only to endure xenophobia and intolerance instead. Why is it that we cannot, in the words of my friend Yehudi Menuhin and my friend Walter Zizulu, from the Northern Hemisphere and the Southern Hemisphere, work for a synergy of culture and not only against xenophobia and this phobia and that phobia? Are we only fueling the polarity of hatred, or are we contributing to the conviviality of culture through love and understanding? That is the question that you should be facing. Occasionally, the interpretation of history itself has been a victim of the modern world. The old adage that history is written by the victors had some truth, but demanding high standards within the archaeological, anthropological field ensures that we seek answers for the whole of humanity and not just the privileged. There is as much to be explored in the humble slave quarters as in a triumphant arch. Indeed, archaeologists often share a common theme with humanitarian organizations: to give a voice to the voiceless and the powerless lobby. When I worked with the Independent Commission for Humanitarian Issues, I worked with hundreds of witnesses: indigenous people, autochthonous people, enfants de la rue, the desaparecidos in Buenos Aires. And they said to me, "We are the lobby for the powerless." And I said to them, "Yes, I am the powerless lobby for the powerless." It is only with your collective will that the voices of civil society can be enabled and empowered and institutionalized to focus on best practice, building skills, knowledge, and tools that adhere to best practice, not only in site preservation and presentation, but in sustainable promotion and management of culture as security. Culture is not only weapons of mass destruction. That is a culture of the 21st century and Star Wars. Culture is not only the development of the advanced military machine to keep us all safe. The Security Council members all keep us so secure. I say this with bitterness, which I admit. I am not such a large figure, not a large figure at all, as not to say what I feel in my heart. This is one of the many reasons why I admire Pope Francis for his humanity and for his continuous call to set aside greed and personal consideration. If we are to unite, not only, as you said, Professor, as experts. Whenever I go to a United Nations meeting, they say, prominent expert. I say, no, non-prominent impert. Not only in the Levant, but globally. But please remember, let us move from the binary, you and I, the darling of America, the darling of Russia, to the peoples of the region. The Mashriq region. Why can Scandinavia have that generic name? The Baltic, the Hansa. Why can the Mediterranean talk of the Adriatic? Why can we not talk of the Levant? Often portrayed by a fearful media as some form of flood, peoples from the region under different names are referred to as threatening to engulf entire countries. The flow of peoples, however, as we know, is no new phenomenon. Archaeological studies have shown us that mass migration is at the heart of what it means to be human. As long as we have existed, we have sought for more. More water, more food, more peace, a better chance of survival. As people move, cultures merge. The influx of people has caused some to react with fear, demanding strong border control to protect their perceived sense of self. I went personally to Sicily to thank the Italian Navy for their work during the phase of Mare Nostrum. This was the epitome of compassion and humanity. By building walls, we cannot seek to freeze every moment in history as the only one of real worth, without acknowledging what has brought them to that point. In Latin, veres scire est per causas scire. The English poet John Donne declared, "No man is an island." So too are we dependent on each other for not only who we are, but who we might become. It is through striving for knowledge that we are reminded of both our tiny part in a much greater whole, or, as Stephen Hawking said, we are very, very small, but we are capable of very, very big things. So, in addition to the senseless destruction of important archaeological sites throughout the Provincia Arabia Romana and Bilad al-Sham, we also endure a diminishing respect for the importance of experts in the eyes of the world media. I think that we have to join forces in recognizing that this expertise places human dignity at the center of the construct. A 2014 study by Peter Fisher from the University of Gothenburg suggested that Jordan's links to Europe were established as early as 1100 BC, and that rather than a strictly Jordanian culture, the flow of ideas, peoples, and artifacts at this time created a wider Mediterranean culture is correct. Then, long before the pyramids. If Professor Fisher is correct, societies grew, organized, and were highly functioning with a steady two-way exchange of culture and ideas that enriched a far greater area than one country alone. I ask you to give serious consideration to what my daughter Sumayya calls cultural diffusion in strengthening us, in that unity, in diversity that we read about so much, especially in this great building. I would like to thank once again Dr. Kafafi for that strict warning to be cautious in our studies and in our findings, that we must be above reproach so that we can share knowledge with others, break bread with others, and break down the conventions of perceived wisdom. Can we not light the candle of knowledge and watch how far it throws its beams in a dark world? Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.